I hope you can't hear that. It's a dishwasher in the background.
That's okay. Hi, everybody. We hope you can't hear the dishwasher. Welcome to Sunday with me and with Claire, and we're here to talk about Game of Thrones. This is our Song of Ice and Fire reread. It's my favourite time of the week, and we are having a little glass of wine, just, you know, to get in the festive season. And of course, we're mourning the loss of a couple of characters, so, you know, I have to, a couple of big characters actually, so we have to drink to their memory and all that kind of thing. That's my excuse anyway, not that Claire's twisted my arm. But we're starting with Cat 7 and going all the way to Ed 13. So we have 7 chapters. Is that right? 8 chapters tonight. So
8, yeah.
Yeah, so a couple of short ones though in between, I felt. So yeah, we had Cat 7, and this is the trial, Tyrion's trial in the Vale. And yeah, what did you take from this chapter, Claire?
I thought the biggest character in this chapter was Alyssa Arryn. And it starts with, and she features all the way through. She features all the way through the character, all the way through the chapter, and it starts with Cat actually physically being affected by the tears of Alyssa. Like they're actually sprayed, you know, it's sprayed onto her face. And then she tells the story of Alyssa Arryn. So in death, the gods deemed that she would know no rest, which is to me a clear foreshadowing for Lady Stoneheart. Mm-hmm. Because actually from this chapter onwards, even in life, Cat doesn't really know any rest from here up until her death. I think I was thinking about spoilers before, and I thought, I think it's probably okay to mention things that have already happened in the TV show.
Oh yeah, no, I think I think so.
Yeah. So
it's a spoiler for the TV show if you don't want to know.
Yeah. I thought just a couple of things that I thought were interesting as observations. The first one, that no weirwood would take root at the Eyrie, which I'm sure we will be having a separate conversation at some point about weirwoods. But just it kind of feels like, even though you've got you've got soil and things like that you can take up there to allow things to grow, you know, in the gardens of the Eyrie, for example, but however much they tried, a weirwood would not take root. And to me, that makes it seem as though there is some kind of network, like the weirwoods are connected in the earth together, and, you know, and communicate with each other, which is why a weirwood would never take on its own. I thought, and again, this might just be me, not, yeah, I might have missed something, but I was questioning about Jon Arryn was planning to have Robert fostered at Dragonstone, according to the Meister Coleman, and Cat thinks that it was Casterly Rock. So it was just, I was just questioning what the truth was. Where was Jon Arryn planning to have Robert fostered? Because Dragonstone does seem to make more sense, because Stannis is there, and in terms of the mystery, you know, surrounding Robert and the Seedy Strong, etc., then maybe they developed some sort of friendship, Stannis and Jon Arryn, and that's why Jon was planning to have Robert fostered at Dragonstone, which everything about that seems to make more sense than him being sent to Casterly Rock under, you know, Tywin being like being ward to Tywin.
I don't know if that does. It makes sense, because I definitely think that Jon Arryn and Stannis were conspiring to get rid of the Lannisters. But it would actually have made more sense had he sent his son to Winterfell, right? To Ned. Like,
yeah, and
like,
I suppose if it's like a kind of trade of like, I fostered you, you've now got to foster my son.
yeah, like, I don't, like, that's where his aunt is. There's lots of kids. Like, you're sending your already weird son to Stannis, who's super weird, and to his Shireen, who's lovely. But was it just to keep Shireen company? Because I wouldn't wish Robert on Shireen. Sweet Robert on Shireen.
Yeah. God,
but then
yeah,
how weak is Jon as a father? Because that child doesn't have any of Jon in him from the Jon we've heard. Or maybe he does, but he's very...
Yeah, it's... I mean, it seems to be there are two types of wards. There's one where it's literally like a hostage, like Theon in Winterfell. You know, if anything goes wrong, if you overstep the marks, we've got your kid here. And then there's the other one, which is being almost like being sent away to boarding school, where you know, there's this process where you're sent away for the majority of your childhood, it seems, to another noble house. But the idea is to toughen you up a little bit, which would have made sense rather than going to Winterfell and being with family.
Yeah.
You know, we need this sickly kid to kind of toughen up a bit.
Dragonstone would do that for sure, yeah.
You know, yeah, that would be the perfect location.
Sonny Frank, hi Sonny Frank. Sweet Robin could be Littlefinger's son. I totally believe he is.
Yeah.
I think he is Littlefinger's, but I think Jon Arryn didn't realize that, and even if he did, I think he would have just kept that to himself, because he needs an heir. I'm actually not too sure about Jon Arryn, in terms of his sexuality or if he's asexual. He was single for so long before he married Lysa. Here's my question though, with your Illuminati theory about like Hoster and Rickon and Jon Arryn and all the old guard, did they have a long-term plan to usurp Aerys and the Targaryens? Is that why Robert was sent to Jon Arryn, so he'd be safe in the Vale as they were growing up? Is that why Ned, well, not Ned, but Robert, because the Baratheon line, I could never really figure out why it had to be Robert that became king. I know they have some Targ blood in them, but is that one of the reasons why he was sent to Jon Arryn? Because those kids would have been very vulnerable without their parents, so the Eyrie is the safest
possibly
place.
I think Robert probably had more Targaryen, but I mean, it goes way back, isn't it? It's like a few generations where the Targaryens were married to the Baratheons, but I think he had there's probably a number of reasons. The fact that he was this larger than life battle commander, but there is that question comes up though. A couple of people have questioned, particularly Cersei in this round of chapters, about why didn't you just take? You were sat there. You were already sat there. Why didn't you take it?
Yeah.
And actually,
and throughout that chapter that we're coming up to, Ed and Cersei, it did make me wonder. I think the kingdom would be much better off had Ned or Jaime been king. I'm not sure. I think.
In fact, anyone.
Anyone. Yeah, and I brought that up before. I think it's very strange that two young boys were sent to a single man to live in the middle of the Vale. Maybe I think it's strange. I don't know why. I don't know. Maybe Rickon felt Ned needed toughening up, and Robert needed to be calmed down, perhaps.
Yeah, maybe.
But I totally agree with you with the reference to Alyssa, Aaron, and it made me wonder: is that going to be like one of Old Nan's tales? Is that actually a metaphor that's just got lost in the centuries? Is that Catelyn that they're talking about? Is it like this woman who's whose sorrow never reaches the valley floor, because she's just, I don't know, full of vengeance as Lady Stoneheart.
Yeah.
Because all the imagery of stone and water is all there in Kat's arc as well. So
Yeah.
I'm totally with you on that. I thought it was very interesting the way she instinctively knew that she had to go see Hoster, because she knew that he would never give Edmure control of Riverrun unless he was at death's door, which says a lot of what he thinks of Edmure, but also how come she can read Hoster, who she doesn't see very often, but can't read Lysa at all? Like completely misses all the red flags with Lysa. Again, we get all of the imagery with Lysa and Blue, with sapphires and moonstones and all that kind of thing in this chapter. Like, she's not a woman that's grieving. And as you were saying that about the weirwood, it made me wonder, the only piece of weirwood, right, is the weirwood throne at the Vale, which is kind of disconnected from the hive weirwood network. And yeah, it's kind of perfect for Lysa, who's completely disconnected from reality. Like I
Yeah.
and so much so that it made me wonder, because there's also a reference to high nervous sound of a child's giggles, which is Sweet Robin. And it made me wonder, is Lysa being drugged in some way? Is there some sort of drug with Lysa that's kind of driving her insane? And if so, because she's still breastfeeding her child, is that driving him mad in some way? Because when she's out of the picture later on, he falls into like this really weird manic depression kind of state.
Yeah.
So it just made me wonder,
and lots of temper tantrums and like some kind of withdrawal. Yeah.
And they're both completely irrational.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was, I was just wondering if that was something. The other thing that I thought was interesting was Brandon Stark reference to him being honorable and taking off his chain mail. I think he took off his chain mail or his armor to fight Littlefinger, which taught Littlefinger a very valuable lesson about the Starks, that they will fight with honor, and they'll let down their guard if they don't think if they sense a weakness or perceive a weakness. So Littlefinger learned a very valuable lesson there, which kind of leads into the next chapter. And this whole chapter, there's lots of references to honor, and you kind of get the sense that Kat is very hyper aware of honor. And even Tyrion says, high as honor is the Arryn words, and it must be going through her head subconsciously, this is because I dishonorably arrested Tyrion. Like, all of this trouble is down to me and my lack of honor. So yeah, it was, I really liked the fight scene with what's his name, Lord Vardis. Yeah. It's I liked the image of the statue falling on him, the stone statue, which was Alyssa as well. But yeah,
it's just that kind of using the statue to steady yourself and get sort of your momentum again, and it's like, and then the next thing is it's all over. But yeah, she seemed to feature as a central character throughout this chapter, which I hadn't really noticed before.
Yeah, no, it's one of those stories that'll make you wonder. This is where knowledge about Bran kind of ruins rereads, because you're constantly thinking, how is he affecting these chapters? But the next one is John 5, if you're done with Kat. I did like the way Alyssa, by the way, sends Tyrion on the high road as well. I really like that.
Yeah.
So the next one is, I think this is the shortest chapter we've had in a while. Very short chapter. And I think it's kind of nice because it reflects how much weight Maester Aemon's words, the few words he says, how much weight they carry. And there's no waste with his words, and there's no waste with anyone's interactions with him. So the guys, all of Jon and all the boys are getting ready to graduate to become brothers. How long are they there at this stage? Many months, right?
I think they've been there a few months, and there is a notion that if you've got to have passed through some sort of level of competency around the training, because if you don't, then you just continue to be in training forever and ever and ever, which is obviously what motivates Jon to go and speak to Maester Aemon. So, you know, he's already kind of thought this through about where to place Sam, and, you know, what's going to be best for Sam, because otherwise Sam would have been a character who would never have got out of the grip of Alistair Thorne, which would have been, you wouldn't have lasted very long.
And this is my question here. I don't think Jon would be the character he is without this intervention as well, because I think when he goes to Aemon and Aemon says at the end of the chapter, your mind is as deft as your blade, I think that's where Aemon says he shouldn't be a ranger. We need him here. We need him as a steward. That's why I think this is what I think he kind of shoots himself in the foot here in a way.
Yeah, good point.
So I did like, there's some nice quotes in this chapter. The fact that the wall, that to keep the wall higher and to keep it going, they would quarry immense blocks of ice from frozen lakes. That's what it was said anyway. Does anyone buy that shit? Like, it's
that's a question that I had. The Night's Watch used to get ice from much further into the lands of Always Winter to build the wall higher, and now it's just they're just patching it up, but they're just constantly repairing it all the time, so they're not building it any higher. That to me sounds like some elevated sense of false history.
Yeah, totally.
Because that's like, if you going deep into the lands of Always Winter, it just makes no sense to me to go that far to bring ice back.
No,
it's a kind of boastful thing. It's kind of just embellishing the sense of history of the honor of the Night's Watch, I think.
I also like the wall weeps because it's warmer in the summertime or whatever, but like there's always snow on the mountains here. There's always like, it's never that hot. I feel like it should never be that hot. Like, there's something else going on with the wall, and I feel though Jon isn't buying it either, because he does kind of qualify those statements by saying the old stories say, or it was long believed. Like, he kind of does qualify statements. So I feel Jon is a bit more open-minded than everybody else with those kind of things, which is nice in this chapter when Aemon does say that you've got a really sharp mind as well. And also the fact that, you know, we go on from Cash, who, like, you know, we get these lines where he wants to go back to Winterfell, and a voice inside it reminds him, you know, that they're your half brothers and Lady Stark won't welcome you. A voice inside him, or a voice whispering to him. So there's a reason he needs to stay at the wall, and I believe somebody is trying to keep him there. I think. And he lists all of the places that he will never see, including Winterfell. He starts with Winterfell and ends with Old Valyria, which is quite nice. If you find the R plus L equals J, but one of the big places he misses is Dragonstone. He doesn't mention Dragonstone, which kind of jumped out at me because I was thinking Dragonstone was in my mind. He does mention the Isle of Faces and the Red Mountains of Dawn, or Dorne, I should say. I kind of want to see more of the Isle of Faces myself. I think that's everything I got from that. The only other line that I really liked from it was, "A wolf needs to hunt." That was the only other thing that I got from that.
Yes, yeah. There's a couple of notes that I made on this about Jon. I mean, everybody around him is talking and refers to his uncle as if he's already dead, and Jon just won't accept that. And I don't know if it's because I don't know if, I mean, he does seem quite empathic, Jon. I know people take the piss out of Jon and say that he's a real emo kind of character, but he does seem quite empathic, and he seems to be quite in tune with a certain sort of level of emotion. I think it's kind of like deep down, even it might even be a subconscious thing with Jon. Maybe it's not something that he thinks about all the time, but it's just this deep down Jon feels that Benjen isn't dead and that he is going to come back. And that just makes me think, is that just because we're supposed to think that Jon's a nice guy and he's hopeful and blah, 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 blah? Or is it because he just knows somehow deep down there's some connection there that makes him kind of go, no, 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 that's not, he's not dead. I just know he's not dead. And it's like, well, how do you know? And it's like, just don't ask, but I just know, you know, that kind of like, it just seemed a bit strange. Jon thinks about his mother in this chapter. The other thing that when he visits Maester Aemon and he thinks about, you know, there's the description about the Maesters wearing the chains, even when they're asleep. And it's, I don't know how I can't remember how it's portrayed in the TV show, but the description of the Maesters wearing the chains in the books is, these are heavy, heavy links. So it would be something that, you know, you'd want to be able to take off at the end of the day when you get into bed. You know, it wouldn't be a comfortable thing. It's like, it just made me think, it kind of feels like you're in chains 24/7, which gives this sense of being enslaved to something. You're in these chains, you can never escape from it. So it's kind of, it just gives you this feeling of like the whole order of the Maesters are somehow, if you're a Maester, you're enslaved to this order. And it's like, what is the deal there? You know, what the concept and the purpose of this order? What is it that you're enslaved to? What's the philosophy? And I know that there's lots and lots of theories about the Maesters being evil and what have you, but it's just that imagery of having to wear this hefty chain 24/7. And just the other note that I've got is, for me, this chapter foreshadows, I know that what Jon's trying to do is establish Sam's position as a steward in the Night's Watch. He'll be comfortable, he'll be safe, nobody will pick on him, he'll have a purpose, he can read, he's going to be good at doing, you know, he'll be good with the ravens, etc. But I think that this chapter foreshadows Sam as a Maester rather than a steward. It goes even further than that. It kind of sets us up to not be surprised later on down the line that Jon wants Sam to be a Maester. It just seems like a natural thing. I think Sam is going to be a different type of Maester, though. I think it's, you know, this is just setting up Sam's story and his future history as being something different in, you know, the order of the Maesters. Yeah, and that's it really for this chapter.
Yeah, I think it sets Jon up as a future leader as well. Somebody who can recognize people's strengths, even just from recognizing what his wolf needs to do. Like, everybody should play to their strengths and talking. Yeah. And we get that kind of intersected with more knowledge about the weakening of the wall and the brothers, especially as we go on into the next chapter and into Sansa's chapter, or sorry, not into Tyrion's chapter, sorry, into Ed's chapter and Sansa's chapter, and we find out that nobody gives a shit about the wall anymore, and nobody cares about the Night's Watch. Yeah, and of course he thinks about his mother here as well. And the last time, we're getting a long break from Ed now. This is the longest break we'll have from Ed chapter in a while. And we've gone from Cat talking a lot about honor, talking a lot about duty, into Jon thinking about his mother. And then we'll go into Tyrion, and Tyrion has the story of his wife and a love that has gone wrong. And there seems to be, we're kind of constantly building up kind of a very negative image of the way women are treated and not listened to throughout. You know, throughout these chapters, which I just think it's very subtle, but that idea that you're kind of, if you're not married, you're a slut, and it's just kind of, or a whore even, like, you know, it's not even, yeah. So yeah, so that's it for Jon. So then we go into Tyrion, and Tyrion is in leaving the Vale with Bran. And yeah, this is this is the least amount of notes I've written so far for any chapter. I mainly just have questions about Tysha. Her name is Tysha. They don't say it in this chapter, but we'll find out later. Her name is Tysha. So I've just two questions. Does Bran, because I'm very suspicious about Bran's involvement with introducing Shay later on to Tyrion. And did he get his idea from that here? And my other question is, will he eventually give the Vale to any tribes that are left around the Eyrie? So that's it. Yeah.
Well, it's I smiled when I read that, because there's huge big facts that are coming out here on this particular reread that I just have no recollection of. And again, I'd said to Stuart earlier, can you remember what it was that Tyrion promised the mountain clans to kind of help them get through? And he said, yeah, the Vale. And I said, I can't remember that. I don't recall that at all. Before I read this chapter, if you pressed me and said, what did I probably would have said something like better weapons, better, you know, better armory, gold, blah, 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 whatever. But that's but I don't remember him making that bold statement of, I will give you the Vale.
I did remember it, because I said it to you. I was asking you about, I think it was when Kat was first going to the Vale. Was that last week or the week before? I can't remember at this stage. I asked you, after Elaine leaves the Vale, will we ever see it again? And I think this was in the back of my head, even though I didn't mention it. I think I must have remembered it somewhere deep back. But you're right, it doesn't. I wonder, is that going to be something that's just left? Even though throughout this chapter he says, I don't know how many times, a Lannister always plays their debts.
Yeah. So
it's leading up to this idea that, well, he will give it to them eventually.
Yeah, possibly. Yeah. It's it just baffled me that I couldn't remember that. That's a big claim for somebody to say, right, okay, if you help me, I'll give you this. It's like with Viserys, if you take my sister, marry her, but I'll need you to make me help me to be king of Westeros. It's a big promise. This is where, to me, there's a huge departure. I know we're not going to talk about the TV show, but I think just referencing huge differences. And I know that he's a very popular, not necessarily popular, but he's a well-liked character in the show. I can't remember the name of the actor, but the guy who plays Bran.
Oh, Jerome Flynn.
That's it.
You're not a huge Robson and Jerome fan, Claire?
No. Oh my. In the TV show, they really played this up as this kind of bromance road trip. You know, there was like fan-made memes and clips of them from the TV show. But actually, it wasn't like that in the books at all. Tyrion knows straight away, and he keeps, you know, he makes no bones about it. You're scum. You're a scumbag. You're a sellsword. But also, I could use you because you're clearly not stupid. You know, you will, and he can defend himself, and that's exactly what Tyrion needs. But the huge question here for me is, where did Bran come from? Why is he here? Why is he in this story at this point? Why did he? That's a pretty calculated risk, standing up and saying, I'll champion for the imp. It's almost like somebody's already paying him. you know, and it could be Littlefinger, it could be Varys, it could be whoever, somebody keeping an extra eye on Tyrion. Or maybe it would be quite funny actually if he was being paid by the Queen, to keep a close eye on a brother. Especially considering if you translate that back to the TV show, that the actors absolutely hate each other, Cersei and Bran.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
But yeah, it just made me think: is he there of his own volition, or has he been placed in the story by somebody else? Is somebody else paying him? And as clever as Tyrion thinks he is, maybe he will never be able to work that out, because that links into him also bringing Shay in as well. And I know that it could be he got that idea because he understands about Tyrion's weakness because of this very personal story that he tells Bran. So Bran must have some kind of he must be quite engaging for Tyrion to be able to sort of open up and talk about this old story from such a long time ago. It leaves him quite vulnerable, and also it's it's a horrible thing to talk about. Because I've just said but the whole thing, I know you've got questions and we're going to talk about this, the story of Tysha and how old they were and who she was or who she might have been, and but the culmination of it, that horrible scene of throwing the coins and the silver was so much it was falling through her hands, and then at the end, Tywin. If you think about just the reality of this, Tywin forcing and witnessing his son, 13-year-old son, having sex with this young girl after she's been raped by all the men in the Lannister army is just horrific. Just not just because it's, I don't know. I mean, you read these sub stories within this whole sprawling saga, and you take from it maybe 2 or 3 of the key details from it. One of them being, oh, isn't that terrible for Tyrion? Because Tyrion's a main character and you're seeing things through his point of view. But just how fucking nasty and horrible Tywin is as a human being, let alone as a parent.
Yeah.
Even if he absolutely hated Tyrion, he was 13, for God's sake, and forcing him to do something like that, it's just horrific. But all we do as readers is kind of boil that down to remembering the story as being something a horrible thing and a bitter. It's a vehicle for us to tie Tyrion's hatred of his father onto this particular story. But it's just horrible. The whole thing is horrible. Yeah. I don't know if she was a crofter's daughter. I don't know if she was, I don't know if it was genuine. I don't know if she was a whore. I don't know if,
I don't think she was, though, was she? We find out later she wasn't, right? We find out later it's all bullshit.
Yeah.
So is that the main reason why or one of the main reasons why why him and Jamie end up having a huge falling out?
Why what, sorry?
When Jamie, or maybe I'm completely misremembering this, when Jamie helps him escape after he kills Tywin, don't they have a conversation about her where he says she wasn't a whore?
Yes.
And that triggers, it's almost like, have you seen Memento?
Yes.
The movie? It's almost like Tyrion immediately needs to hate somebody for what happened.
Yeah.
So he transfers all of what he hated Tywin for immediately to Jamie. Because it's so horrific, where it's actually, and we've talked about this before, it's actually, he can't live with the fact that he actually went through with it and raped her, that he was capable of following through with that. Like, that's a serious motivation that he even going into wins, he hasn't reconciled that at all. He needs serious therapy. But I think it shows us a couple of things, that Bran is clearly very engaging. Maybe he told Bran because he was at death's door in the Eyrie, not sure if he was going to make it. Now he's trying to get through the Vale, and he's not sure if he's going to make it. And it's just, this is the worst thing. This is his motivation as a character, and we need to find it out now, because we're halfway through the book and we need to know why Tyrion is the way he is. And also, I think this is one of the, like with Jerome Flynn, and we get like, we're very attracted to Bran as a character. Same with Peter Dinklage, I would argue, because the show has cut out a lot of the negative, dark shit to do with Tyrion that we'll get in the later books. The other thing it does is it sets up in our minds, it tricks us, and it's only like it was on my second reread, but this reread as well, the story that Ed hears in the next chapter, and how we're supposed to instantly believe the Lannisters are shit and they're evil, and look what they did to Tysha. So obviously they're pillaging and raping their way through the Riverlands, whereas it's a bit smoke and mirrors, because a lot of that story doesn't quite add up in the next chapter. But because of this story, it kind of distracts you, or it helps create an illusion.
It's even enforced by Tyrion tells Bronn the story, and then he falls asleep, and even he dreams about threatening Tywin in the Sky Cell. So kind of like that, he's sort of subconsciously living this through his dream state, that that was such a horrible thing that his father did, that when he fell asleep he ended up having this dream where he's threatening him, and he's just been there, he's just been in the Sky Cell, so he knows how horrific that is. So again, it's just reinforcing the Lannisters, and Tywin in particular is this horrible big bad. The Lannisters are evil, and this is how we're meant to feel about certain characters. But again, this is because of this memory from Tyrion. But if that is the case, and you're right, that did happen when Jaime lets Tyrion go later on in the story, and he tells him the truth that she wasn't a whore. If that is the truth, what was Tywin playing at? Just to humiliate Tyrion?
I don't know.
Just horrible. Yeah.
When in doubt, secret targ.
Yeah, it's just the whole event and memory of that is just horrible, just horrific. Yeah.
The other thing in this, as he's telling Bronn this, and Bronn said, I would have killed a man at 3:13 or 30. I would have killed the man that did that.
Yeah.
And Tyrion's response is, you may still get the chance. If I was Bronn, I'd be going, this guy is totally open for manipulation.
Yeah.
Why doesn't he want to kill him himself? Like, why? Like, it's easy to manipulate somebody who's always going to use other people to do their dirty work.
Yeah.
So I think he instantly opens Bronn up to being able to manipulate.
Just talking about Tysha, this isn't my theory, but this is a theory from an old YouTuber he isn't on YouTube anymore. And I can't remember his name. That's really bad. But he had a really good theory that Penny and Groat, the dwarves that were in the tumbling troop at King's Landing for the wedding, that, and then obviously Tywin meets later on, and he's on his travels with Penny, that Penny and Groat are children of Tysha, and sense. the reason that she calls them Penny and Groat is because that's the smallest denomination of money, and that completely is that represents the gold and the silver as part of this horrific event in what would be, if it's true, a fairly innocent young girl's life. if she became pregnant and had and it was just like, yeah, that is it's quite far-fetched, but actually that would be quite interesting, the fact that they're called Penny and Groat.
It's one of those things as well, is Tyrion looking back with rose-tinted glasses about her enjoying it and being like open to this sexual encounter, like Robert with Lyanna.
Yeah.
So I always forget about Penny. I'm looking forward to seeing Penny again, because I miss characters like Penny when I get to. I know a lot of people don't like her, but I really like Penny. So yeah, that was Tyrion, and then we're into Eddard's chapter. And I would like to preface this by saying I looked today for the Preston Jacobs series that deals a lot with this chapter. I think if you're interested in some of the stuff that I'm going to be talking about, I think it's his Riverlands. I think it's his Riverlands series, and I believe he talks about this. I could be entirely wrong, but Preston Jacobs is often treated, and I think unfairly, as the Alex Jones of the A Song of Ice and Fire community. I think he really does his research. Probably goes into too much detail for a lot of people, but I find his videos really entertaining. And actually, I think his breakdown of this chapter, which I haven't seen in, I'd say, about a year at least, but from what I can remember, it's a very good breakdown of this chapter and of this encounter, which seems to come out of nowhere, and we won't get a payoff for this until, I feel like, a little bit of clash, but mainly feast, right? That this is what happens in this seems so removed from everything else that this just gives you an indication of how brilliant George R. R. Martin is, that there's so much happening here, and so much cloak and dagger stuff going on, and Ed knows it, but he's so prejudiced he just goes with it. But anyway, I would recommend Preston Jacobs if you haven't, although I'm sure everybody knows who Preston Jacobs is. If you're watching us, you probably know. But yeah, so Claire, this is Ed 11. So we haven't seen Ed since Tower of Joy, and suddenly he's sitting in the Iron Throne doing Robert's job.
Yeah, so yeah, Robert's still off hunting, and he seems to have been gone for quite a while. So the necessity of this, it's not just Ned's decided he wants to sit on the throne. There's a pressing audience here with the villagers. So we get this story of the villagers wanting to talk about these Lannister brigands, who've turned brigand and destroying the Riverlands and causing disruption and murdering people, and the description of the mounting. So it feels like war has already started in the West and in the Riverlands. It's already happening. There's introduction, or at least more of a description of some of the other characters, like Sir Raymond Derry, and Mark Piper. So these are the characters that are from around that area, around the Westerlands, and they are explaining what's happened. They're there, I suppose, to support the villagers and explain what happened, and just say, yeah, it was the Lannisters, it was the Mountain Who Rides. A couple of things that are really random that I wanted to mention here. The first one is how interesting it is, and I kind of skipped this, and I know we've mentioned this a few times, about the complete removal from reality of the general population of Westeros, the small folk, and the fact that Ned is astounded that they think he's the king. He's been referred to as Your Grace, and he's amazed that men who live within like a short ride of the Red Keep have no concept of what their king actually looks like, and probably the Queen as well. There are stories that she's beautiful, but you know, you didn't have things like stamps and internet and things like, you know, so no, it's not a surprise that they don't know what Robert looks like. But again, it just highlights that the small folk are so removed from the details of this story. What they're seeing is just the devastation of their day-to-day lives. So they've come to petition Ned for help, and ultimately what he decides to do is to in Robert's name is to issue the King's Justice. So one thing that I wanted to mention, I know I keep going on about this and it probably won't mean anything at all, but when Ned refers to the Iron Chair and he says that the legend is that the Iron Chair is made from 1,000 blades, again, that number 1,000 features. And I was speaking to Stuart about this before and he was like, you're just reaching because, and he thinks it's like lazy writing from the author of like, you can't think of a number to describe a massive amount, so you just say, oh, 1,000. But I think there's something there. I do think that there's something there. It's been, this number has been mentioned so many times randomly throughout the story.
And
1,000.
actually, which ties in with Preston Jacobs, who has his 1,000 Worlds series, which is George R. R. Martin's kind of universe, is the 1,000 Worlds series. And just because Sonny Frank has made a comment kind of that ties in with what you said, that didn't Ned go visit different towns in the north and meet local people? That's a brilliant point, because Ned, the people would come to them naturally in the winter and would all be kind of around the same area so that they could all share their supplies. So you're absolutely right. Ned would definitely be more in touch with his people, and there's less of
Ned
them.
Had, even in his immediate service, Ned would have a place at his table with his family for dinner, a kind of rotating, you know, come and sit with us and tell us about your life and your day, and you know, so you would have the opportunity to at least one point in your life to actually sit and have supper with the Lord of Winterfell and his family. So, and that was a kind of tradition of Ned's. I don't know if that was just Ned or if it was a Stark thing, but they were much more in touch with the small folk and what the people wanted.
That's because it's it's more essential to survival in the north for everybody to know everybody, and it's just not in King's Landing at all. Although it is, but they don't see it as being that way.
Do you think that there's a question here about what's happening in the Riverlands? Is it something that...
I think it's bullshit. I don't believe it. I think it's bullshit. I'm not buying it. I think maybe the Mountain raided something, maybe, but I'm not buying it. Something smells fishy, because none of this, well, first of all, they all arrived covered in blood. Now, that's days and days riding covered in blood. Like you would have cleaned off. But the only reason you wouldn't clean off is if you need to sell your story. The other thing is you've got to question where the people, and even Ned is questioning. He says something about the knights forcing these witnesses here, and the two knights, as you said, are Piper and Darry. Piper is Hoster Tully's he's one of his guys, and he's best mates with Edmure. And Raymond Darry, well, we had that before. We talked about the Darrys before. They were loyal to Targaryens. And Ed, what's his name? Piper, he is the one when the witnesses start loosely describing a giant guy who attacked him. He's the one goes, "Oh, it's the mountain. It's the mountain. It has to be the mountain." He traveled with them for days without figuring that out, and now he's figured it out in the presence of Ed. It's almost as if Darry brings him there knowing, like, if Edmure is his best mate, he's probably a bit slow on the uptake. So knowing that, oh, we'll let him figure it out and it'll look like it's more natural. when it gets to being in front of Ed.
So do you think that Tywin has done this deliberately to draw Ned out of King's Landing and get him up into the fight and to cause even more trouble?
Yeah, I kind of think that it might be Littlefinger.
I was just going to say, or could it be Littlefinger just doing he just
saying
constantly
all the right
wants
things.
to. Yeah, his mission at the moment seems to be just to completely pit wolf against lion. You know, that's he's setting all of that up.
And throughout this, he says, like, throughout this, Ed is saying he doesn't know what this is about. Like, he's saying, I don't know about this. I'm kind of doubting it. There's like lines all over the place. And then when he asks how many were in the raiding party, he gets 3 different answers. 100 at least, 50, hundreds and hundreds.
Yeah.
It's like eyewitnesses are notoriously unreliable anyway, but this is so unreliable. It's like, Ned, you're being goaded here. Like, can you not see there's something not right with this story?
But again, it's kind of like somebody said, just go in and appeal to his sense of justice. You want justice for what's happened. That is what will make Ned Stark sit up and listen. You know, justice, King's justice. And that's another thing about justice here. King's justice to the false knight. So basically, execute Gregor Clegane.
And he even admits it. This is the line I was looking for. He says he wondered if the knights had given them a choice. Like, so he's even... he knows there's something not quite right here. But also, they say the biggest thing, and I didn't notice this until I saw that Preston Jacobs video and he pointed it out. No survivors in Wentish village, or Wentish town, is it? No survivors at all. And yet, Darry completely describes everything that happened to a T. What happened while they were being raided? What happened as they tried to escape? How would they know that if no one survived? They don't have a witness from there. So that was like when I saw that in Preston Jacobs' video, I went back and read through it, and I was like, yeah, there's a lot of holes in this story, and even Ned isn't buying it.
Yeah. But again, it ultimately appeals to, even if the story's got as many holes as Swiss cheese in it, it's still
racist. Not all cheese has holes.
Cheesist. That it ultimately will appeal to the honourable Ned Stark and his sense of justice for the people. And it's very clever, because if that's what's happened, and knowing Ned, like, he's doing this on behalf of Robert, almost like there's so many reasons why Ned would do that, why he would have said, right, Thoros, Beric, get yourselves together. You are now, you are going to be seeking the King's justice and striking down this false knight. So the Brotherhood without banners, I mean, I do remember who they are and what they were for, and that they were sent out by Ned. And we get a lot of them a bit later on in the story, obviously. But their whole original mandate was the King's justice. And that was to bring down Gregor Clegane. So I just wonder ultimately what will happen with the Brotherhood without banners, because, have they forgotten that? Do they remember that? Is that tied in with Lady Stoneheart's story?
Here's my theory. I think, and this isn't, I think Preston went in a completely different direction, but I can't really remember who he thinks is behind this. But this is what I think. I think Littlefinger is behind this. I think everybody is playing an angle. Hoster, it suits Hoster for Ed to send resources. Plus, Ed kind of has to send someone to help his father-in-law. It suits Tywin because he wants war in the West. By the way, again, Ned's hand summoned Tywin to King's Landing now. Why do you have somebody out there, the Warden of the West, just playing rogue? But I think it's Littlefinger because there is like a lot of suggestion that Littlefinger is working with Renly. The first person to volunteer is Sir Loras. We do find out later on that Loras and Renly are very, very close. I think Renly and Littlefinger, I think Littlefinger's probably working a number of angles to cover all bases, but I think Littlefinger and Renly perhaps thought that they could get Highgarden to get involved in the West and help Riverrun, and that would cut off Tywin perhaps, or at least create big problems for Tywin. While Renly could take the throne in King's Landing or something like that. There's some like, because the biggest mistake Ned actually makes here is not sending off, you know, this band of brothers off to look for the mountain, because even Littlefinger says, oh, Sandor Clegane, like he'll inherit everything, but he won't be happy with that because you know he'd want to kill his own brother. I think his biggest mistake is being so rude to Loras Tyrell, because that I think that helps cement Renly's ideal in the last chapter we'll look at, the last Ed chapter we'll look at today, where Renly says, you know, let's get out of here, let's take the kids, you know, let's plan this before Cersei, which he's totally right, but he'll disappear very quickly once he realizes that he can't get.
And that's quite funny because that's reflected in the next chapter, in Sansa's chapter, where she questions. It's
the first question.
Yeah. Interesting.
It's the first statement about Loras, and I think I wonder, because Littlefinger has, at this stage in the series, Littlefinger has Harrenhal, right? Has the East, pretty much.
Yeah.
Right? So there's something else that Littlefinger, he's secure enough that he has another base covered, whether it's the Tyrell angle, I'm not sure, but there's definitely, I think there's a lot there to suggest that Littlefinger will be owed something by the Tyrells later on.
Yeah, I think what Littlefinger has got in front of him is this kind of graph of different variables. If this situation does this, if I anticipate that somebody like Ned Stark would do this, then that action will have this consequence. It's basically like placing people and situations into place like a game of chess. But if something goes wrong, then there's always plan B. So this will happen, and then that will have this knock-on effect of, I think, as much as he's like chaos is a ladder, I think everything is completely, is intricately planned with Littlefinger, and he knows that even if his main plan A, goes completely tits up, that it doesn't really matter because there's this other option.
I think ultimately for Littlefinger, he wants Winterfell and he wants Riverrun. They're big chess pieces for him, because coming back to the cat chapter, because of that argument, and to the things that we're told, was, hatred for the Starks, whatever, but also Hoster Tully sends him away, which means he never sees Cat again. He hates Edmure because Edmure squired for Brandon, and he was weeks with just Lysa, which would drive anyone crazy. And would make you power hungry and ambitious.
Yes.
But that had to have been a very defining moment in Littlefinger's life, and he's not the kind of person that would forget that. Like later on, I don't think it's going to work out as it has done in the show. I think Littlefinger is going to play some sort of role there at Riverrun. He's
such a complex character, and there are so many. I go backwards and forwards with Littlefinger about, he's the definition for me of this. He's not a black and white character, because you could equally argue that Littlefinger is almost like a modern day champion of the people, but it's set in that historical context. So he's he's come from a very small house. He's seen at first hand what nobility are like, and how that, he could effectively be a champion for the people. You could look at it that way. Or he could just be a complete power crazy lunatic. But
well, the more you learn of the great heroes of history, of our own history, the more you realize that a lot of them had pretty nasty qualities as well.
Oh yeah,
that they achieved certain things for the good of all, but a lot of them were driven by selfishness or selfish pleasure-seeking activities or addictions or whatever. And it would be nice if we did get the old switcheroo with Littlefinger and Varys, because the idea, you do feel up until relatively recently in the series that Varys is championing the people, but actually he might actually be working on behalf of a royal family, and that it'll actually be switched around, that we'll think that Littlefinger that he might in his own way be working for the people. So yeah, you're completely right, that could be it. And maybe he wants to prove that he can make it all topple down, maybe not to everybody else, but definitely to himself, that he can bring them all down if he needs to. Did you lose me? Claire lost me. Did you lose me?
Sorry, yeah, I took the earphones out because I was going to let Marwyn out, and I thought I can hear you while I'm moving around, but it's not going to let me, so I will.
Well, you let Marwyn out, and I'll start talking about Sansa, will I? Okay, so that was Ed's chapter. Oh, and I meant to say Sir Mark as well. Yes, I think I mentioned him. That's Sir Mark Piper. I just wrote down wrong. Anyway, Sansa 3. So yeah, we're only on the 3rd chapter from Sansa. We've had the least amount from Sansa so far, but it's gonna be ramped up, the amount of Sansa chapters we get towards the end of the book. And yeah, her first statement is he wouldn't send Sir Loras, so she's a big question over why Ned wouldn't send Sir Loras, and it will have consequences later on for everybody that he didn't send Loras. Littlefinger creeps on her again and says that life isn't a song, which I think it's one of those rare times that she should listen to Littlefinger. Littlefinger often says things that in hindsight people should listen to, and this is one of those times that she definitely should listen to what Littlefinger is saying. And she says another line, which I will ask Claire what she thought of it, in the song Knights Never Killed Magical Beasts. And I was trying to think, have we had a knight kill a magical beast yet, like a direwolf or a dragon in our series so far? I wasn't sure, but I'll see what Claire has to say. I was just wondering, Claire, Sansa, so I was just saying that Littlefinger creeps on Sansa and said life isn't a song, and it's one of those few times where actually Littlefinger is being really honest and you should bloody listen to him. But he knows that the person who's hearing it isn't listening, so he's saying it knowing that's not being listened to, but she should listen. But she has this line in the songs Knights Never Killed Magical Beasts, and it made me wonder, it's probably completely unrelated, but have we had a knight kill a magical beast yet? Like a direwolf or a dragon? No, we haven't had any dragons yet, but I was just wondering, was there a knight that had killed any magical beast? Yeah, I don't think we have. In like this series. In history, yes, but not in this series.
No, we haven't, because I mean, if we think about who the magical, we've got the dragons, direwolves.
It depends.
And then we've got the magical creatures like, the Kraken and things like that may or may not appear in the show.
And I wondered if you could extend it to magical people that may have magical genes, like Targaryens or Starks.
Well, yeah, it does. I think the phrase is in the song, knights don't harm magical creatures, not necessarily magical animals, I suppose, just magical entities. So that could be Bran, could be Melisandre, it could be, you know,
Yeah, no, it was just one of those things that stuck out for some reason. I don't know why. The other thing which I wondered, was it relevant? She's trailing off talking about what had happened in court that day with Ned, and she ends before she's cut off by saying that Ned accepted oaths from Dornish free riders. And I wondered, was that any Dornish free riders that are going to come into the story later? Did I miss something? And
I don't even remember that.
Yeah, she says it. And later these two brothers came before him, free riders from the Dornish marshes, and pledged their swords to the service of the king, which, from Dorne, I don't know why. Anyway, father accepted their oaths.
Maybe that was free riders that were attached to Beric, because he's from the marshes, isn't he?
Yeah,
like the Marcher Lords. So
maybe that's what she's talking about. Maybe it's that moment with Beric. Maybe.
Yeah.
So she also had this strange dream where she thinks Lady's in the room, which is very sad.
Yeah.
But it's preceded by her getting her period for the first time. So there's probably something there to do with blood magic in the Starks, and then her being kind of reconnected to the wolf blood and all that kind of thing. And you can feel it throughout this chapter, especially when we have that out of the mouths of babes thing where Ned finally realizes what's happening with Jaime and Cersei. But the big thing in this chapter is, after you know what she does towards the end of this book, it's hard to read this chapter and you can see why people don't like Sansa, because she's so blinded by her own ambition and dreams, and she's so young. But you can see why people are like, oh, she's getting ready to tell. She's getting ready to tell.
Yeah.
Ready to say it.
Yeah.
I was also saying that this is only the third chapter from her, and we're going to ramp up in how many chapters we get from her. So, yeah.
I've just a few notes that I've made. I thought it was interesting that, you know, Sansa was in the throne room when all this was happening. Even Ned observed it and thought it was a bit like, whoa, Scepter, why have you got Sansa here? This is a bit too much for her. And although on the surface level it's kind of like, oh, why didn't he ask Solaris, because he's so handsome and wonderful, and probably that probably is the extent of her decision making. But I just thought, regardless of that, it's interesting that Sansa is already thinking about leadership decisions that she would take, and she's, you know, questioning her father's decisions. Not necessarily, I don't think it's about questioning Ned's decisions. I think it could have been questioning anybody's decisions. And also later in the chapter about she doesn't like to be interrupted. Although that was quite interesting. She also defended the Hound, kind of, with the argument with Arya, when Arya hates him for killing Micah the butcher's boy, but Sansa kind of like, she didn't, she kind of said it was sort of his own, you know, it was his own fault, and anyway the Hound is in service to Joffrey, so it's not his fault, kind of thing. I just thought it was interesting that she sort of defended him. And then the other thing that made me think about with this chapter with Sansa is, we think about Sansa being, again, if you just boil it down to like this surface level, that she's precocious, she's very much set against Arya, who we think is the salt of the earth and this wonderful tomboy who won't take any shit, and, you know, just rather than who you'd send out, just kill him, you know, the Mountain did this, then just, why isn't he dead yet? You know, that's how Arya would deal with it. But with Sansa, you get the impression, Sansa versus Arya, that it's like, oh, you know, she's just this carried away with like these romantic notions of knights and Queen of Beauty and blah 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 and what have you, but actually she's spent a considerable amount of time up until this point thinking about preparing for her role as queen ultimately. So she, even though it's coming across to us as like, oh, you know, flowers and fairy stories and you know knights of yore and all this kind of like, you know, she has this fanciful notion of what it's like to be a lady. I think that from a long time previous, I mean, you've got this all happened in Winterfell. You're going to be marrying Joffrey and you're going to become the queen. She's had all of that time to think about this up until this point, and everything, it feels like all of this, you know, her connection to the court and to majesty, and we feel as though, oh, she's just a brat and she's in love with Joffrey and she's in love with the notion of this, that and the other. But actually, she's kind of taking this sense of duty that, again, you know, similar to a mother, Lady Cat. This is Lady Sansa, and she's, as far as she's aware up until this point, going to have this amazing position as queen of the realm. So in a way I can kind of forgive her silly little girl, you know, because I actually don't know if that is, it's outwardly that's how she appears, but I think there's a lot going on inside Sansa's head that even she doesn't express in her own point of view. So yeah, she seems to be thinking quite a lot about preparing for this role of being queen, and it's not just a fantasy thing. I'm doing what I do in interviews, going round and round in circles. The only thing that I wanted to say at the end of this chapter is, and it's a question, when Arya is like, yeah, well, let's just go back to Winterfell, but by the way, can we take Syrio Forel with us? And Ned says, well, you know, yeah, if he's willing to enter my service. And I just kind of paused at that and thought, wasn't he already in your service? Didn't you hire him to provide these lessons for your daughter? I know that what we're meant to think is in service into his household,
Yeah.
But this whole series of this lump, particularly of chapters that we've been looking at this week, I think tells so much about these words can be interpreted in so many different ways. These phrases, these quotes, these point of view feelings that come from, you know, I mean, we've got so many examples of it. The big one for me is give me my crown, give me my golden crown. That is huge. That's one of those, like, here's the writer telling us that it means this is what it means, but actually this is what inevitably it ended up meaning. So don't take, I'm struggling to express what I mean here, but these set of chapters for me speak volume, speak loud and clear. The author is trying to communicate to us as readers, when something is written here, it can be interpreted a million different ways, and that's the fun of the book series, and that's why we've got a million YouTube channels dedicated to theories around this book series.
I think you're totally right, because Dany's chapters surprisingly are the most literal in a lot of ways. So I think you're totally right, that when that's said, that yeah, you could definitely, and I know we're definitely going to get on to something in the next chapter where you have to interpret what she said. I think you're right about Sansa preparing for her role, and I think Littlefinger sees that in her, because Littlefinger was expecting, I think, Ned to send Loras because the image of sending such a prestigious knight after Sir Gregor. But Ned knew that sending a Tyrell after Lannister men, that's all out war. Like you cannot pit Tyrell against Lannister in that part of the world. But unfortunately, with his actions, he actually brings them together. You know, eventually. But yeah, I think, but Sansa knows, no, you should, for the image is important. Like, image is really important. And Littlefinger knows that that's how highborn people think. Image is very important. So Littlefinger has learned to manipulate that. Sansa, not so much yet. She will, though. She'll learn the hard way how to manipulate that. And the sooner she learns that life isn't a song, the better. And of course, then we have Arya, who ends this chapter by saying, "Oh, don't worry, we'll be going home soon to Bran and Rickon and Hodor." And you know, Sansa's like, "Hodor, what the hell?" Whereas Arya is just like all about, you know. But I forgot how funny that was. You should just go marry Hodor. I'm sure there are people out there shipping Arya and Hodor. That would be amazing. But yeah, it is strange that we learn that Ed has finally seen the truth through Sansa. When she's saying, you know, he's not a lion, or he's not a stag, he's definitely a lion. And Sansa sees beyond coats and things like that. But yeah, it is interesting that we learn, like we see Ed, like kind of coming to grips with that through Sansa's chapter. I thought that was interesting. And just the bitter irony of Septa Mordane saying, "I'm sure your father knows what's best for you."
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah, so that's it for Sansa. Sansa's chapters will be completely amped up from here on in, and tragically so. And yeah, we open Ed 12 then, with pain is a gift from the gods.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, that's what the Maesters are all about. And he's realizing, I think it's in just this chapter, he's realizing that Pycelle is definitely Cersei's creature, Cersei's man. And I'm a bit confused here with the meeting. So this is where Littlefinger, he sets up that he thinks Littlefinger's on his side here. He thinks he's arranging to have the city guard have his back. But we know, so everything that Littlefinger says here is like a lie, pretty much.
It makes me laugh with the visits from Littlefinger. It's like he pops up and it's like he knocks on the door and goes, "You figured it out yet? No, right. I'll see you later."
Yeah, I just need to. It's just I'm ready to make a move. So if you could just come back to me, and then I'll move my pawn. Or you move your pawn, I'll move a bishop or something. I don't know chess that well to make those analogies. Yeah, we learned that Joffrey has been sent back from the hunt because somebody has told the king that there's a big boar in the middle of the woods that he should get.
Yeah.
Now, here's my question. He's been away for a while at this stage. Like, it's, you know, when people go on hunts, it takes many, many years. But, oh, hey, AU, how are you? It takes many, many, many years, many, many weeks sometimes for a hunt. And we know that Robert has been out there for at least 4 or 5 days, maybe longer at this stage. I'm guessing longer. But Cersei arrives to their meeting in the Godswood, beaten up. And I think he didn't beat her up. I think she was trying to win more sympathy from Ned to buy more time. I think it was only a matter of time before Ned figured it out. That's what I think. Now, Robert is completely capable of beating her up. We saw that in the last chapter, but he hit her in the last chapter. But the injuries that Ned refers to in this chapter sound like it wasn't just that he didn't just stop with that slap. That there's more than that. Did I
Sounded like she had black eyes as well. She was bruised.
Yeah.
So it sounded like somebody had like properly smacked her in the face. It wasn't just a slap across the face. It was like a punch.
So my theory is that she had somebody do that so that she could win favor from, because she tries everything. She tries to win sympathy. She tries anger. She tries to feel him up. She tries a lot of different. She tries a lot of different tactics here to try and win him over. I did like the idea that Ned said that he wanted it in the Gods Wood so that the gods could see. So I assume we're going to revisit that through somebody else's eyes later on. And yeah, I'm going to let you talk about your, well, I believe this to be true, but I think you finally bought that theory in this chapter, right? About Gendry.
This is going back to what I said about this particular set of chapters. For me, illustrates that the author is trying to let us know, he's dropping clues to the readers that a phrase or an action or a description from a point of view character isn't necessary. It can be interpreted a number of different ways. So there's the surface, meaning, and then there's potentially a different meaning, and you can look at this in a number of different ways. When I read this, I just immediately thought, okay, this is right here in the text. That's Marwyn yawning.
Sounds like a toddler. He is a toddler, of course.
It seems that to me, Gendry is definitely the child of Robert and Cersei, and to me, it's right there in the text. It's not obvious, and it needs to be interpreted in a slightly different way. But again, I spoke to Stuart before we started our conversation, and he said, no, you're seeing it differently, da 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 da. But here's my explanation. She says there's a number of things here. It seems to me, I get the general vibe that something as Ned and Cersei seem to know each other from way back on quite a familiar level. Immediately when he sees her, says it had been a long time since Ned had looked upon her beauty. And to me, that I got the vibe that there was something there previously. I'm not saying that they had a relationship, but it feels as though they knew each other in the past on a deeper level. They seemed very familiar with each other. Now, there's a couple of things. There's two things here that I want to reference. The first is the seed is strong, and the second one is a golden crown. Both, and the third thing actually, which is the comet. Those three things are interpreted by the characters within the story in their own way to benefit themselves. That line of thought into some of the text that we get here from Cersei, she says two things. She says, Robert once got me with child, and Jaime found me a woman to cleanse me. She didn't say, I got rid of it. I took some tansy, whatever, that's how I got. It's how you interpret those two words, cleanse me. And I think that there's a possibility that she could have got pregnant with Robert. If you think about Gendry's age, when they would have just got together, they would have just been married. So there would have been an expectation there that she produces an heir, possibly for pressure from her father. So this could have happened quite easily right at the beginning of the marriage, that Robert gets Cersei pregnant. Did happen. I think in Cersei's mind, she would have seen that as that child is the bastard to her true born children, and in her mind, her true born children are with Jaime. because immediately when she's justifying this to Ned, she says, well, what about the Targaryens? It's like, you know, that's how she justifies it in her head. So she says two things. Robert got me with child once, because Ned's saying, how did you never have a baby in the 12, whatever. I mean, he says 12, but surely it was a little bit longer than that. But anyway, 12 years that you were together, how did you not get you pregnant? Robert got me with child once. Jamie found me a woman to cleanse me. Means that she went full term with the baby and she gave it away because to her that was the bastard, that was not the true-born child. So she wanted to get rid of it. So to her that was it. That was her cleansing herself of this mistake that she'd made by getting pregnant with Robert instead of with Jamie.
Because she doesn't need a woman for that. She doesn't need a woman for an abortion.
No, she doesn't.
Like, Jamie just needs to get her tea.
Yes, yeah. So a woman took the baby, therefore cleansing her sense of purity in this relationship, with this incestual relationship with a brother. The next thing she says is, he never knew. So Robert never knew. Now that could mean Robert never knew I was even pregnant because he was always so drunk and busy whoring and whatever, you know. I mean, for God's sake, if I can conduct an incestuous relationship with my brother right under his nose, then why would I not be able to be like pregnant and have a baby and him never find out about it? So if you interpret those two sentences that way, Robert got me with child, Jamie helped me to find a woman to cleanse myself of this, and he never knew. I think that is Gendry. That is Gendry. There's no, I mean, Stuart was saying, no. There's too many people that would have noticed that she was heavily pregnant, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, no. But then you go back to the villagers didn't know what the king even looked like. And, you know, these kind of things are possible, I think. So that's my... a lot of, I mean, I've never really, I thought, maybe, but just reading this, it jumped out at me as, she had that baby.
AU agrees with the Oracle as well. I have kind of always bought into that theory. This is the problem with George, because he does mess up with the years in this, throughout a Game of Thrones in particular. He does mess up the dates in his, especially through Ned. There's like Ned seeing Tommen, or the last time he saw Tommen, he was still breastfeeding, but there's no mention of him being able to see Tommen because he hasn't seen Robert in 9 years, so Tommen wouldn't have been around. That's way back in his first chapter. Then he has the 12 years reference here, which we know Cersei and Robert are actually married a lot longer, we assume. I think they have to be. So I wonder, is there a mess up here in the years? Either Gendry was born, not necessarily conceived, but born just as the Ironborn rebellion was starting, so she could have hid that very easily from him. So that's about 9 years ago, right? So if she conceived that kid maybe 10 years ago, I don't know how old Gendry is though. He seems to be early teens, but so there could be a slight error on George's part there in terms of the timeline. He does make errors. The other thing as well, ridiculous as he is, he does make timeline errors sometimes.
Yeah, the phrase "he never knew." He never knew about. He knew about other bastards. I mean, what did Maggie the Frog say in the prophecy? You'll have 3 children, and Robert will have, how many was it?
16.
Was it 16? Did he know? We know that he knows about Edric Storm. He knows about Maya, because everybody knows about that his first bastard was this girl in the Vale. Even Kat knows that. I think he knows. Does he know about Barra?
Yes, he knows about the twins that Cersei had killed.
So he's aware of the bastards that he's had, but yet he doesn't know who Gendry is. He doesn't seem to be aware of it. So that's another, he doesn't know.
The other thing is,
he never knew.
We know that she goes to Casterly Rock a lot, and we know that Tywin isn't always home. So it is something that they could have hidden, I think. And also, if Gendry is even older, if Gendry is the same age as Jon, for instance, depending on how long it took Ned to come back after Tower of Joy to deliver that news to Robert, Cersei, between Tower of Joy and Ned coming back, could have conceived Gendry. And by the time Robert gets news about Lyanna, he's so lost in that grief that maybe he doesn't know. Now, maybe I'm mixing up the timeline now, because I'm not entirely sure how long there was between him finding out Lyanna was dead and him having to marry Cersei. And it's very muddled, I think.
Yeah.
But it feels as though it was like he went off the rails.
About 14, 15 years ago, this all seemed to have happened. And I think quite quickly she would have had, which would make Gendry about 13, 14. And just, I mean, when in the chapter way back when Ned goes to visit him at Tobo Mott's and asks Tobo Mott, how did you get him? Oh, well, he gave him some flannel. And Ned said, no, really, how did you get him? And it was like he was basically delivered by some lord or knight or whatever. There was some special arrangement there that you don't get to hear the details of, but it's like, quite clearly he was a royal bastard. And also, doesn't Ned ask Gendry about his mother, and he says something about blonde hair or golden yellow hair or something like that? I don't know, maybe Cersei felt guilty and went to visit him a couple of times when he was younger, who knows?
I think Cersei definitely had feelings for Robert early on as well.
She did.
And also, I mean, this is a bit of a stretch potentially, but Cersei is potentially going to be the most evil character, the way she's going. And there's definite parallels between her being some sort of dictator and the parallels between maybe her and Hitler. Hitler was obsessed with cleanliness and talked about murder as cleansing, like the German state. And there's definitely like you get that sense from Cersei that when she's getting rid of somebody, she's cleansing herself. She's getting rid of a problem. It's like
it's like ethnic cleansing.
Yeah, like when she kills the twin bastards at Casterly Rock, it's because it's like a stain on Lannister reputation. So she needs to clean that out. And you definitely get that sense here, I think. There's absolutely no reason she needs anybody to come in and cleanse her. Jaime can very easily track down tea.
Yes, yeah. It's that phrase "cleanse me." I think it's got it's got a different meaning to what we're expected just to read on the surface.
And the big question is that if she did have Gendry, why did she have Gendry at all?
Well, again, I think that Ned asks her, oh my God, this was just a horrible thing that you did. What on earth could Robert have done to you to make you hate him so much that you've done this to him? And she just says, it was Lyanna. It was, she was, I think she would have been fully prepared to yes, she was in love with Rhaegar. She wanted to be with Rhaegar. That wasn't going to happen. Here's Robert. And I think there was some, I don't know, affection. Maybe she was feeling about Robert how Sansa is kind of feeling about Joffrey at the moment. Like, oh, this, I could be queen one day, and I can, this could. So, I mean, she was only young.
And if he was beating her, there's, that's where Joffrey.
There's a chapter much later on, way later on, I think in Feast, where Cersei, it's a Cersei point of view chapter, which we don't get in Game of Thrones. We don't get any of this, but we get a little bit more of an insight into Cersei's mind later on in deep into the story in Feast, where she's thinking about Robert, and it sounds horrific. It sounds as though he did rape her, and she took vengeance by when she said about eating his heirs and things like that. You know, it just horrible, really horrible. So she really took this personally, but I think maybe that was she was conflicted about that throughout the pregnancy. I think she wanted to be queen. She wanted to have Robert's heir, but she knew that he loved Lyanna, and ultimately she loved Jaime. So maybe this was way into the pregnancy when this happened, and then she had the baby, and it was like, just get rid of it, just cleanse me of this child that I consider not trueborn, because it's a combination of me and Robert, and that's not what I want. What I want is Jaime, and she's got this fixation about Targaryens, and you know,
has deluded herself into thinking she's complete when Jaime is inside her. But she's going to sleep around a lot, Cersei. So it's not that.
Well,
Tina said me completely.
There's
a couple of problems with Ned in this chapter. He's trying to figure out a way of saving the children, and it'll come up in the next chapter as well. But there is a definite sense that Ned knows that it will come to a certain point where the Lannister children will be, that people will expect them to be killed. He is trying to figure out a way of saving them. And I feel like there's a battle between, like, I wondered at the end of this chapter, would Cersei have been compassionate towards Ed if he just worked with her rather than against her? I don't know. Eventually she would probably double cross him. But he's just obsessed with saving the children throughout this. And I also have a big question about Lyanna Stark. Because at the beginning of the next chapter, Lyanna Stark, we're going to have a description of her with a garland of blue roses and tears of blood. And it sounds like the Virgin Mary. Like, it sounds like it's a very similar, a Catholic idolatry that's in the Catholic faith in particular, to do with Mary. And it just makes me wonder, but she can't possibly have been that good. Like, she can't possibly be that great.
No.
And there's something a bit weird. Like, and I just wonder, has Cersei picked up on that? It's like all the men around her entire family, and a Targaryen, a prince, have just fallen for this girl. And it's probably jealousy, but there's obviously something, like, there's something weird about Lyanna. Something like, did she have some sort of magical powers or something? Like, it's a strange, the fact that all of this has basically stemmed from her, even more so than Rhaegar. A lot of this has stemmed from Lyanna.
Yeah, it's like the myth of Lyanna. Yeah. And then, you know, it's actually trying to unpick the reality. There is something else in this chapter that stands out to me in relation to all of this kind of way back stuff, is when Cersei's trying to seduce Ned and it doesn't work, and she's grasping at all sorts of things, and she throws this honourable Ned Stark stance back in his face. You know, like, you think you're too good for like flirting, but actually, and she mentions his bastard, you fathered a bastard, and she talks about that. And then she immediately asks what about Ashara Dane. She asks him directly, why did Ashara Dane die? Was it for the brother you slew or the child you stole?
Yeah.
What the actual fuck? So the brother you slew is an easy one. That's Arthur Dane. So
we already knew that. Yeah.
We knew that. If Cersei is aware that Ned had a bastard, who's the child that he stole?
Oh yeah.
She asks, Why did Ashara? What you tell me, Ned? Why did Ashara Dane die? What was all that about? Was it because of the brother you murdered, or was it because of the child you stole? And then we just go on to something else.
Well, I assume she thinks it's Jon Snow, right? But
how would he be stealing his own bastard?
Well, because you wouldn't normally claim a bastard like that and take it like all the way out of the mother's hands. Like, isn't the whole story we find out later with Ashara that she couldn't handle the grief of losing Arthur and her son? Isn't that the whole story? Isn't that why she kills herself? It's two losses too many. But
did she? Because I always thought it was she. But like, if she had a child and it was stillborn, and we don't know who the father was.
Don't we get two stories though? Isn't there two stories out there? Like, that's the story that that's the story the Reeds give, right, to Bran. They know that it was a stillborn. Isn't that right? But nobody else knows that, or everybody else has assumed that it's Jon.
Right.
It's very confusing. But the other thing, it just occurs to me, Cersei must have known and met Ashara and Lyanna in their like circles, in their highborn tourney circles and whatever. So she would have known. Like, Ashara Dane must have been, like, she was the most beautiful woman in Westeros, more beautiful than Cersei.
Yeah.
So and Lyanna was crowned Queen of Love and Beauty as well. So like, they must have been, they must have at least entered one another's circles.
Yeah, weren't they? I'm together in like
Ashara Dane
and Cersei. Didn't I? Maybe just imagining things.
Like,
John, if you're still there, if you can help us out here, or even better, if you want to jump on and help us out.
Yeah, John, if you want to, let me know. Also, let's not forget, in this chapter, she says the name of the book in the book. Also, actually, I just glancing at the end of the chapter here, it ends with the stars were coming out, which is also maybe a Dane reference. And there's also, the reason I opened up the book as well is because Ned asks, did she make the same offer to Jon Arryn? And she slaps him, and then he says, I'll wear it as a badge of honor. Which, like, okay, so she gets beaten up, and now you're going to throw that back in her face? Because she said the exact same thing when Robert hit her, so a bit nasty.
Yeah, I
think Ned would have killed those kids, by the way. I think he would eventually kill the kids. He also mentioned in this chapter that the realm already fell to a Mad King once before. He didn't want it falling to a second Mad King. Is that Joffrey? Is he talking about Joffrey? Yeah. Because later on, Robert is going to say that he was as bad as Aerys. So the fact that Ned still has this blind loyalty to Robert is like beyond me. I just don't understand why he still has that. But this is a difficult chapter to read, though, isn't it? When you know what's coming. I found this one to be particularly difficult.
Well, we know there's only another 3 Eddard chapters.
Yeah. The other thing, just as he says that to her, did you make the same offer to Jon Arryn? In the show, they kind of set it up. They introduce a clip with Jaime and Cersei, and it looks like they may have helped plan the Jon Arryn thing, but we know now they had probably nothing to do with it. Did Cersei maybe wanted to get out that the kids were at Robert's eventually? Like, because she obviously didn't make any move to stop Jon Arryn. But Littlefinger and Lysa did. So because her hitting Ned suggests she knew Jon Arryn knew.
Yes. She kind of admits everything when she sees him. There's no hiding anything. Nope. Yeah.
So just there, I wonder. So then we are on to Dany 5. We still haven't had very many Dany chapters. But I think they're going to get ramped up now as well, because we still have 5 Dany chapters to go. So we will have a lot more of Dany. Actually, I think we have more of Dany than anyone else left in the book. So yeah, we have Dany, and she's eating her supper. And so gross. It's so hard to read. It's so gross.
Yeah. It's very descriptive.
Sunny asks, what about the theory that Dany is from the south because she talks of lemon tree? Is that Dany that was stolen? That is definitely a theory out there, that she is Shara Dane's child, right? Is that what you mean, Sunny? Or that she's Lyanna's child? That is definitely a theory out there. I like the idea of her being maybe a Shara's child, perhaps. And then that leads into another theory that Quaithe, who she meets later, is a Shara Dane. But I think George has ruled that out. I think he said they're definitely two separate people, I believe. Sorry to ruin all of your theories out there, guys. I could be wrong on that though. But yeah, so we have. I don't know, Sunny. By the way, I'm not. I think Dany is a true-born Targaryen. But I also think that she grew up in the south, or that she's at least spent time in Dorne. So yeah, we get the Dosh Khaleen making a. Sorry, Dany has to eat this heart, and so gross. And the Dosh Khaleen then used this whole ceremony to make a prophecy on what kind of son Drogo is going to bring into the world, or what kind of child he's going to bring into the world. And they do so very fearfully. They seem really afraid when they're talking about this. And then they are shocked that it is the prophecy that they've been waiting for. He is like the prince is riding the stallion that mounts the world. Question. Why do they automatically think that that's going to be a stallion that rules the world? Because don't stallions mount when they're going to have sex? Couldn't it be just like the stallion who fucks the world?
Yeah, just complete destruction and devastation.
Doesn't necessarily mean it doesn't
just
it's
almost like
they
the
mean like he's
destroyer.
going to ride the world, ride it into destruction, ride it into what? Where is he going to bring them? Where is he going to bring the world? So I just thought that was that was funny for me anyway. So then the only other thing that I took from this is that Dany shivers at the thoughts that she'll have to go back to the Dosh Khaleen someday. I've always thought that she will have to go back. I don't know if it'll be the same as what the show did, but I have always thought that she will have to go back, whether she'll have to go back and retake it, or whether she'll have to go back and hide out there for some reason. I'm not sure. But also, it's quite cold when she refers to the man who was her brother, Viserys, and ends with that he was a coward as he died, and that fire can't kill a dragon. But other than that, just the stallion who fucks the world. That's what I took from this chapter.
Well, I got quite a bit from this one. This was probably my favourite chapter out of the slot that we've done this week. I think when they're talking about the prince who were, the stallion who mounts the world, that's immediately I thought prince or princess, because you don't know if she's going to have a boy or a girl at this stage. The massive amount of references everywhere to basically female sex, femininity, female sexuality, whatever you want to call it, mother of mountains, the fact that they're there for the pregnancy. There's something that's described as like a womb lake, or lake of the womb, or something like that. It's all very related to kind of like female fertility. And if we've got the stallion who mounts a world, who is a prophesized prince brackets or princess, we've got ourselves the first prince that was promised. So this, in the story at least, here's another prince that was promised. They're talking about prophecy, they're talking about it being a prince, they're talking about this stallion who mounts the world. So I think there's quite a lot of symbolism there, just around sort of, they're talking about prince, but actually it's probably princess, and they're probably referring to Dany, and the prophecy is probably the whole mother of mountains and coming back and gathering Lasars together in Vaes Dothrak will be the role of Daenerys. And I think that's where we're at in the books currently, where at the very end of Daenerys' last chapter in Dance with Dragons, her and Drogon are confronted by, I think it's called Jogo.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, and I think what will happen is they end up bowing down to Daenerys because she's got more strength than them, because she's got a dragon and this is a flying horse, effectively. So anyway, that's going way far too much into it. But going back to what happens in Drogo's hall with Viserys, I still, there's something that really still saddens me about this, about Viserys generally. Yeah. The beggar king, and the fact that all of this stuff is going on around him that he's clueless about.
He's kind of an adult version of Sweet Robin in a way.
Yes, he is, very much so. Yeah, but I mean, just the fact that it's got to the point where Jorah feels that he can be extremely insolent publicly in front of Viserys by openly calling him a fool. I mean, it's just like, whoa, Jorah, presume much, and Daenerys never pulls him up about it at all. She never chastises him for like, hang on a minute, who the hell do you think you're talking to here? We are Targaryens, we are blood of the dragon. I mean, she's always reminding herself of that. I've spoken about this a couple of times during this episode, but the crown of gold is a clue that a lot of the key phrases and prophecies in the book can have several meanings. We get a perfect example of that here, sadly, or at least horrifically. I think that it's interesting that we have a prophecy of the stallion who mounts the world, a prince that was promised, which kind of juxtaposes with, ultimately in this chapter, we also have a prince that was destroyed. So you have the prophecy of a prince on the horizon and one that's murdered in the very same chapter. I think that the last thing that I wanted to say about this is I think it's interesting that Dany was quite calm about everything, about Viserys, but she also, I don't feel she was cruel. And she did kind of give him options. She was like, come here, brother, come and sit here. It was almost like she knew what was happening, but she was trying to, I don't know, maybe do it softly or give him a kind of way out, or at least sort of make his last few moments, just be here with me, with your family. And she tried to sort of like pull him to one side and say, just come and sit here. You can have the eggs, you can have them. If that's what you want, you can have them. Which again, I thought was so sad, really, in a way, that he's like scrambling around in the background, trying to sell her eggs to raise funds to have sellswords, because he knows he's got no power whatsoever. So he must just be completely frantic at this point.
Well, she kind of picks. This is the moment when she picks the Dothraki over Viserys. Yeah. Like, this is it. Like, this is, and it's even as she does it, she slips her arm around Drogo. It's like they're so united at this point.
Yeah.
It's the most loving relationship that we've had in the series. It's the most supportive relationship, the most sexual relationship, apart from Jaime and Cersei, which is just weird. But it's definitely, like, I feel like Drogo, and it's the one that they make the t-shirts for, right? It's the sun and stars and sun and moon and all that kind of thing. Yeah. Like, it's definitely like there's no place for Viserys here, and it is really sad. And I feel like, I think you're totally right, and I've said this before on our reread. I am loving Dany's chapters a lot more this time around. I think it gives a welcome break, because you know so much of what's going to happen in Westeros. It can be like that last chapter is so hard to read with Ed. I think it's just really nice that you're seeing, God, Dany's getting more and more empowered here. Like, I'm enjoying it. I also think this is the moment Jorah betrays Robert. I think this is the time, because he approaches her and he says, "I'm yours to serve." It's almost like this is the time, and there's it might be blood magic as well. Like, you know, everything is coming together at the right time for her. And you're right, he's totally down on Viserys here, but he also attacks the blood pie with, like, eagerly. It's like Jorah definitely wants to be part of her squad. He doesn't want anything to do with the usurper. And this is also where she picks Rhaego as the name of the baby, and asks for Jorah's opinion of it. And he says it's going to make the usurper tremble. And actually, it would have. It would have had a great effect. I just thought there was plenty of blood magic here, I feel, with the Dothraki and with her eating. It's like she is going to embody those two cultures coming together, I feel. But also, I forgot how willing she was to give up the eggs at this stage. She hasn't made a connection there yet.
Maybe maybe that's that kind of like, maybe that's her just putting the Targaryen stuff. All she's ever heard all of her life is, and all the only kind of male influence that she's had ever in her life has been through Viserys. And then you look at her experience with Drogo. He's completely different. He's a man's man, and he's a leader, and he knows what to do with the power that he's got. And she can see that now, and that must just be so eye-opening for her, based on everything she's known so far from, you know, self-entitled Viserys. Drogon isn't self-entitled whatsoever. They're complete opposites of each other as men in Daenerys' eyes, you know, her husband and her brother. So maybe that's just like the eggs are kind of this Targaryen history, ancestry. Maybe at this point she just thinks, forget it. You want the eggs, just take them if it's so important to you. But she also knows that he's doomed. He's never going to get. She's already thought for quite a while, even before she was pregnant. He's never going to make it to the Iron Throne. This just isn't going to happen. So
you said Mount is like riding and sitting in the saddle, like sitting on the throne. Yeah, I totally agree. But I just think that with, like, lots of prophecies, I think they're open to interpretation. I think the important, probably the least like obscure part, is the fact that it is a stallion. It isn't a mare. The other thing I'm kind of interested in is the fact that Dany is she's no maternal instincts at all. Like, she doesn't imagine herself as a mother. She doesn't imagine herself cradling her child. Like, she talks to her bums and stuff like that, but she doesn't imagine, oh, what it'll be like to, like, hold my child. Or she doesn't do, like, what you'd expect from a first-time mother. And she's our only pregnant point of view character at this stage, right? We haven't had one yet. Yeah, I feel like I just feel there's something a bit off with her not.
Well, she's kind of she holds a belly when Viserys is coming towards her, but again, I think that's more, rather than a kind of protective maternal thing, that's more a kind of, I'm now Drogo's, you can't do this to me because this is the status that I've got now. I'm carrying his child, so, you know, and I want to emphasize that.
And it's all about the power of it, and it's all about the leader that that child is going to be. It's not about her being a mother, if you know what I mean. It's not about her being like, yeah, it just seems to me that like there's a lot of like signs already that this child is never going to be it. Like, because I don't think we're supposed to miss this child later on.
And everything that's being talked about, and the prophecies, and the stallion, and the prince that will, you know, that's prophesized, it could quite easily be flipped around to from a male to a female perspective.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and again, like I felt more like, oh my God, don't give away the eggs, rather than, oh, that baby's gonna die, so I don't have to think about that baby. Like, it's horrible, but just because she doesn't she doesn't really discuss it as a mother. Kind of, it's just a bit strange. And then we have the next chapter, which is our last chapter, which is Ed 13. And so we've said goodbye to Viserys, so a little drink for Viserys, and now, well, we're about to say goodbye to somebody else. Not in this chapter, but he's on his way out. So this is Big Bobby B. He's come back, and he's been badly injured, but this chapter notably begins with a dream in the crypts of Winterfell, and Lyanna's statue whispering, "Promise me, Ned," and she wore a garland of pale roses, her eyes wept blood. So that kind of image of like the Virgin Mary or something. Maybe we'll find out that Jon Snow was like an immaculate conception. And so, because the way they talk about Lyanna, we have a lot of reference to the dagger as well, which will be carried through the entire chapter, which to me it's Littlefinger's dagger. So to me, that is kind of a sign that he's carrying the answer the whole way through this chapter, but is missing it. So yeah, did you have anything in particular that you wanted to talk about?
Right. Okay. There's a few things here. I think when he's
in a lot here as well.
With the dream initially at the beginning of the chapter, and I get the impression that there's a real fear there within the dream, and probably in reality around the Kings of Winter, almost as though they're watching and judging Ned. This constant promise me, and we actually have several promises. The whole theme of this chapter for me is about promises. There are 3 promises that Robert on his deathbed asks Ned to keep, which is eat the boar that killed me, don't kill Dany, I've changed my mind on that completely, do not kill Dany, and thirdly, take care of my children. There are 3 distinct promises that are made there. I mean, obviously Ned thinks about, he interprets that very quickly as, rather than the blonde-haired children that Cersei's had, Ned begins to think about the welfare of the bastards, and he interprets that as take care of my children for me. I just think, going back to the beginning of the dream, the constant promise me, and the fact that the Kings of Winter are there in the dream and in the crypts, kind of giving this judgmental, fearful atmosphere, is if Ned had fulfilled this promise, and surely, you know, what the generally accepted theory is that Lyanna gave birth to Jon Snow, and that she asked him to raise Jon and keep him safe from Robert, so that Robert didn't know what had happened. And we feel that on the surface, that hasn't Ned fulfilled that promise to his sister. If that's what she asked him to do, if the promise was, please take my son and raise him and make sure that Robert doesn't ever find him, if that was the promise, then why is he so agonizing over it all the time. Why is he having these bad dreams about it? If he had fulfilled the promise, why is it haunting him so much? So that was the main question that I had. I also thought it was interesting that it occurred to me that what we're seeing here is Ned sadly seeing both Robert and Lyanna in their deathbeds. So he was the last person to see both his sister and Robert alone in their deathbeds. I thought it was interesting that Robert thought that the boar was some kind of divine intervention that was sent to kill him because he'd been so horrible about wanting to kill Daenerys, and he had this complete change of heart. There was never, ever, ever, ever going to be a situation where Robert didn't go out on that hunt. I mean, the fact that they came up with this magical, this rare, because it wasn't the boar at first, it was the white stag.
Yeah.
And that's what, and then it was like, oh, that's not there anymore. It's disappeared. It's doesn't, you know, whatever. But there's this boar, and it's like, while we're out here, you know. So there's never ever any way that Robert was ever going to turn that down. I don't think even if the realm was burning, he would have gone after that white hart, that the white stag. Couple of things as from a general story point of view is I'd totally forgotten that Renly and Pycelle were there to witness Robert put the seal onto this letter. That just like completely blew my mind. I'd totally forgotten that there were actually witnesses.
Which, like, later on, Littlefinger says that Varys told him, but obviously either Renly or Pycelle told him, one or the other.
Yeah.
Or it could be both, because, you know, they're all working for the Lannisters. Like, Littlefinger's working for Renly and he's working for the Lannisters. So he's probably told by both of them.
Now, I don't know if I got actually to the end of this chapter, because it got to the bit at the very end with Littlefinger turning up and and Ned confessing that he knows the truth about the mystery. Clearly, Littlefinger knew everything all along, and he warns Ned against siding with Stannis and that it would rip the realm apart. And then he starts putting his, well, what about this? And if we move this, and if you do this, and what, you know, he starts going into his plan Bs. And he also talks about the numbers around the City Watch. I don't know if there's anything.
It just
beyond
ends with
that.
Littlefinger. It ends with Littlefinger is saying that he'll get Jaina Slint and the City Watch together.
Oh, right, okay.
And that'll be 6,000 gold pieces to do it, which sounds like a lot. And that he smiles and gives the dagger back to Ned hilt first. Again, just this, like, here's the answer right in front of you all the time. Come on. And also he comments on, I meant to say that in the Godswood earlier on, he commented on the fact that Cersei was wearing her emerald ring, which was also part of that bet.
Yes, it was. Yeah, she got that back. Yeah. I think it was very obvious that Varys turned up a kind of like enter stage left, and he just appears from nowhere, and he's asking, oh, who gave the king the wine? And oh yeah, the stewards. And he's very clearly stirring up trouble again between the wolf and the lion. He just, you know, that's definitely happening. I don't know, did the letter, or do we know if the letter that Ned was writing to Stannis
that was one of my questions.
Right.
Isn't this a missing letter, or is it?
I think it like might be.
Or does it show up in Storm? I actually, do you know, now that you say it to me, I meant to go and look that up because I couldn't remember what happened with that letter. There's something about that letter, though, that is important, I feel, later on. I will look it up. There is something, that letter either goes missing or it's key to something, and I need to look it up, actually. Was there anything else then on this chapter?
No, I mean the no, I don't think so. I think
my big question here is he reinterprets Robert's words to apply to Robert's bastards. Did he?
Oh yeah, he says my heir.
Yeah, and he also says, "Oh, I will protect your children." And in his head, he's going, "You're bastards." Is there what if he reinterpreted Lyanna's words so he could accommodate her promise?
Yes, the lies we tell for love.
Yes, exactly. What would those lies have been? Do you think Lyanna wanted him to keep fighting or to keep the rebellion going, or is there another child, or is there something else going on? Is Rhaegar not dead? Is it Mance Rayder? Like, all these mad theories.
There's definitely something else going on.
There's something else.
There's definitely something else that and I'm sure we'll get there. I mean, I know after, when after Ned's death, we don't get all these kind of fever dreams and him thinking back to what happened at the Tower of Joy, but
also he only thinks about it getting to King's Landing. So there's something about Robert that is leading him to feeling guilty about not fully keeping Lyanna's promise. Yes. I feel there's something not right. Is Robert the father? I don't know if that's ever been posited. I don't know if it's possible. But what is it?
I've heard so many different variables. I've heard that at the tourney, Lyanna was raped, or at King's Landing or wherever she was raped by Ares, and that's why Rhaegar took her, because he felt responsible for what his father had done, and that Lyanna. I mean, I honestly, I don't even know if Lyanna was pregnant and if she had a baby. I've got no idea. I mean, that's not really clear.
No. When you said there about the three promises that he makes to Robert, a lot comes in threes in the three dragon eggs, three heads of the dragon, all that kind of thing. So what three promises could he have made Lyanna? If we're playing along with the way the show has gone and the way most of the fandom has gone.
Well, we know that Lyanna didn't trust Robert. She knew that he would sleep around, that he wouldn't make a good husband. She was just not interested. And again, if you parallel Lyanna with Arya would probably say a similar sort of thing. I don't want to marry him. I don't want to marry the kid. I don't want to marry Robert. He's he's just drinking and whoring, and he's not going to be an honourable husband. So she wasn't interested at all in Robert. He was obsessed with her, quite clearly, but as a lot of people seem to have been. But she wasn't interested. So maybe it was about either don't tell Robert something or keep something from Robert, or don't. I think Robert was one of the promises.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Then the other one, I think, is to raise the child as his own. Or is there something to do with the Danes? Was he supposed to leave that child with the Danes? Because I could never figure out how the Danes are still on board with him, how they take him in on the way back.
Yeah, they seem quite they I mean, you'd think that they'd hate Ned, but they talk about him quite favourably, as if he's some kind of hero.
Yeah. The other thing,
they even name one of the Danes, Eddard, don't they? After in honour of Ned.
Yeah.
And it's the same as Ned doesn't feel hateful at all towards Rhaegar, and again, you would completely expect him to feel that way.
Yeah. So then what reason would Ned have for not keeping all of his promise to her? Like how impossible was what she was asking of him? Is it just because he's so bloody honorable he can't do it? Like in this case, he can't, for the good of the realm, keep Robert's promise? Is that why he couldn't keep Lyanna's promise? Is it for the good of the realm? I feel like people go into the Lyanna story and Rhaegar story completely tunnel visioned. They have the result that they want, and that's it. It's all neat, and it's just a case of everybody else needs to get there. But I think the Cersei and Jaime story proved that it's not neat. It isn't about Cersei and Jaime being hopelessly in love. We learn that now as we move through the series. That's not what it's about at all. There's a lot more going on there. So I feel, and I always feel that like Lyanna is portrayed as such a like virginal character, and Rhaegar is such a romantic guy that they must have been in love, and it must. But you know, the romance of the ages we're getting with Drogo and Dany, and most people have big problems with that. So we're definitely going to be blindsided, I think, with the Lyanna Rhaegar thing. I don't know if it's going to be as clear, and I don't know if
there are just too many children all of the same age as well, or very similar age. So if she asked, if the promise was take this boy who, you know, we know as Jon Snow and bring him up as you bastard, that's what he's done. He's done that. So he's fulfilled that promise.
Yeah.
So
there's something else, because he has.
There's something else. Yeah, there is something else.
The biggest mistake he makes here is, it's so annoying, because I found myself shouting at the page. It's like, just do what Renly wants you to do. You don't have enough men. You just don't have enough people. Like, why are you?
You're just a sitting duck completely.
It doesn't make any sense. And he loses.
Cersei, even in the previous chapter, says, "What about my wrath? What about me?" And it's like, whoa, that is a complete and direct threat, right? You need to go into lockdown mode. You need to get the girls away.
And she says she won't do exile. She says exile isn't an option.
Yeah. So what did he think was going to happen?
The fact that he thinks Tywin Lannister is going to leave Westeros, he's deluded. I feel part of me thinks Ned has a death wish here.
Yeah.
It's I don't know whether it's the pain. Is he completely, like, is he just in a bit of a milk of the poppy days half the time? I don't know. Like, it just seems.
Maybe he just realizes he's never ever going to get back to Winterfell, so he just thinks, "Oh, fuck it." But it's just he makes so many stupid moves. I mean, Renly seems to know a lot more. Renly seems to know a hell of a lot more than he's letting on. And even when he urges Ned to seize the throne, and now we'll be there and we'll do this and we'll do that, you know what, I've got this. They start talking about numbers. Renly seems to know about the children. It seems to suddenly be like an open secret that everybody really knows apart from Robert.
And he's so, like, Littlefinger basically tells him, he's like, okay, you need to buy men from me. You need to buy men through me. And we know from Tyrion earlier on that a Lannister can always offer a higher price. And Littlefinger will always look for a higher price. So why on earth would you trust anybody who's willing to sell you loyalty? It doesn't. I mean, it's the most dishonorable thing.
In all honesty, the way things are at the moment, I'm very surprised that Ned, Sansa, and Arya have not been like ceremoniously executed in their beds already.
Yeah.
That night that Cersei met him in the Godswood, I'm amazed. But it seems to be a few days have passed since Robert comes back from the hunt.
Well, that's my big question with Cersei. I don't think Cersei realized how much power she had at that time, because otherwise she would have taken Jon Arryn herself, but she doesn't. So this is my question over Cersei. I don't think, I think as we move to a POV with Cersei in later books, we realize she's actually growing in power. It's not like she was always confident that she had that power. And she only, like, you know, in the next chapter, she's going to tear up that letter. It's only when Joffrey's in charge that.
Yeah.
But again, it's like Ned had this blinded loyalty to Lyanna, and he does to Robert, and it's just so weird. I do feel like Ned is gearing up for maybe needing to kill those kids, though. Which, again, just take Renly's offer and keep the kids. You know, lock them up in the tower. Do what you have to do. Like, you know, it's just this.
But again, it comes down to that stupid sense of, but the right thing to do is Stannis is that, you know, even, and Littlefinger tells him as well, but it will tear the realm in two. There will be massive bloodshed if you do that. You're actually keeping the peace by going, you know, considering this option, and he just won't.
And the other thing is, Jon Arryn had Stannis. He had somebody who knew the truth.
Yeah.
And he still died.
Yeah.
So I don't, like, Ned just thinks, I don't know if he thinks he's invincible, but it certainly seems like it seems like he's ready to go. It seems like he's not, I don't know, it's weird. It's a weird chapter.
Well, it kind of feels like that, I think, as we get into the next round of chapters and we get Ned's in the Black Cells, isn't he? And Varys comes to visit him. So I think we get a few more of his inner thoughts at that stage. Whether I can't remember whether he regrets any of his decisions or whether he seems to just, from what I can remember anyway, just fall into a bit of a pit of depression.
I think he can't trust Cat anymore. Jory is dead. You know, like he backed the wrong horse with Littlefinger. Why didn't he just like, again, go to Varys, play them off one another, do what they've been doing to you for the best part of what, 7 months now at this stage, 8 months? How long have they been there? Yeah, it's
even if it's just listening to Renly and seizing the throne and just holding it until Stannis gets this bloody letter saying, right, come on, you know, this is I'm sat on the throne, but only while you get here.
Also, why doesn't he send a raven?
Yeah.
Like, can you not trust that method of communication? Can they be intercepted? Because I assumed they just went straight to the maester at the next house that you wanted to go to. Like, why? Like, it's going to take ages.
Yeah.
Like, isn't he going to find out Robert's dead before Ned gets that letter, before he gets Ned's letter? No?
Yeah. I know. It just is very.
There's a lot
strange.
there's a lot with Ned that's a bit strange. But yeah, that's all I have on that one. Yeah. So we thought this was going to be a shorter one, but clearly,
sorry.
Yeah. Very bad. So guys and girls, we are going to read from John 6, which is chapter 48, all the way to Cat 8. So it's actually a good break between our Cat chapters for next week. So we will see you the same Bat channel or Cat channel, the same cat time. Oh, that's terrible. Thank you to AU and Sunny and to everybody else who will watch this later on. Thanks a million, Claire. And
you're welcome. I was just going to say, John, if you want to join us one week, please do. You are, even if it's just a particular chapter that you want to jump in and kind of comment on, then let us know in the comments and we can dial you up on Hangouts, no problem.
Yeah, definitely. That is an open invitation. So so thanks everybody for watching. Thanks a million, Claire. I hope everybody has a great week and enjoy reading our next set of chapters. Talk to you soon, guys.
Bye.